Welcome back to the Restricted Handling Daily Intel Brief. This is what's been going on in Russia in the past 24 hours. The biggest Russia story today starts inside Ukraine, where a new corruption investigation has collided with the most serious public challenge to Volodymyr Zelensky's wartime political authority in months. Ukraine's anti-corruption agencies say they are investigating an alleged criminal organization involving current and former lawmakers and senior officials in the presidential office. The full evidence has not yet been released, so this is still an investigation, not a verdict. Even so, the timing is brutal for Kyiv. Mykhailo Fedorov, the popular defense minister Zelenskyy dismissed in July, has called for elections during martial law and described Ukraine as facing a governance crisis. Fedorov is not a random opposition voice. He helped build Ukraine's digital state and became closely associated with its fast-moving drone effort. His criticism, therefore, connects politics, defense reform, corruption, and battlefield effectiveness in a way that can reach well beyond the usual political class. Ukraine now has several difficult problems stacked on top of each other. Elections are prohibited under martial law and would require new legal, security, and logistical arrangements. Parliament is considering Yevgeny Kamara as the next defense minister after a sequence of high-profile removals. The anti-corruption agencies have to prove they can pursue senior officials independently without becoming instruments in a political fight. Zelenskyy, meanwhile, has to maintain wartime command while answering a legitimacy challenge from someone with a reform record and a potential electoral base. For Moscow, this is an opening that does not require a new offensive. Russian officials can amplify the corruption investigation, question Zelenskyy's mandate, and tell audiences that Western governments are protecting an unstable leadership. That message will be aimed at Ukrainians, Europeans, Americans, and Russians at the same time. If Kyiv handles the investigation transparently, the institutions could emerge stronger. If officials interfere, reshuffle again, or allow the dispute to paralyze defense management, Russia gets a strategic return from Ukraine's internal crisis. Moscow is also raising pressure on the United Kingdom. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said Russia could regard Britain as a participant in the war because of reports that British-made drones were used for strikes inside Russia. His phrase, "with all ensuing consequences," was designed to keep the threat open-ended. It could point toward cyber activity, covert disruption, diplomatic retaliation, attacks on interests outside Britain, or a more direct military response. The ambiguity is part of the deterrent. British Prime Minister Andy Burnham answered that the United Kingdom would continue supporting Ukraine 100%. That response hardens both positions. Moscow has publicly argued that London may have crossed from supporter to belligerent, while Burnham has framed continued support as a test of British reliability. The most likely danger is a widening gray zone rather than a formal Russia-NATO war. More assets, companies, transport routes, and personnel can become targets for activity that is difficult to attribute quickly and difficult to answer proportionally. That concern is reinforced by a German court verdict. A Stuttgart court convicted a Ukrainian man for acting as an agent in a parcel operation that used GPS trackers and spare parts to study shipping routes for possible future attacks. The court said a Russian state entity initiated the operation. 2 other defendants were acquitted because the evidence did not show that they knowingly joined the plot. That split decision matters because it avoids treating everyone as guilty while still giving judicial weight to the central sabotage finding. European governments have already accused Russia of using arson, parcel bombs, surveillance, and infrastructure disruption as parts of a hybrid campaign. Moscow denies directing those operations. The new verdict will still push European services toward tighter cargo screening, closer counterintelligence coordination, and more scrutiny of recruited intermediaries. Each defensive measure adds friction to trade and travel, while each new case increases political pressure for a collective response. This is how conflict expands even when armies never cross a NATO border. The military picture is also moving deeper into Russia. Ukraine launched large waves of long-range drones toward Moscow and other regions, burning a major logistics warehouse and reaching energy infrastructure. Russian authorities claimed hundreds of interceptions and acknowledged successful penetrations, injuries, and damage that included a fire at an Ufa refinery site. Exact totals remain hard to reconcile, but the purpose of the campaign is easier to see. Ukraine wants Russia to disperse air defenses, pay recurring repair costs, and make people far from the front experience the war's consequences. Russia answers that challenge with interception numbers and a story of control. Ukraine answers with images of fires, closures, and repeated launches. The decisive measure will be regeneration. Can Ukraine build drones, guidance systems, and launch packages faster than Russia can restore refineries, warehouses, and air defense stocks? Can Russia keep protecting Moscow while covering an enormous industrial geography? This contest is less cinematic than a single breakthrough, but it can steadily tax budgets, logistics, and public confidence. Diplomacy remains alive at the edges. A Kremlin aide said there was no update on a possible visit by Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, emphasized that diplomacy is usually quiet, and repeated that Russia will not accept a freeze along the current line of contact. A reported exchange of 103 prisoners on each side shows that limited humanitarian deals can still work. Those deals matter to the people involved, but they do not amount to a shared plan for ending the war. The Russian strategy today is therefore layered. Keep military pressure on Ukraine, exploit Kyiv's political turmoil, warn outside supporters, probe Europe below the conventional threshold, and preserve narrow channels for transactions that serve Russian interests. The key question is whether Ukraine's accountability system can absorb a real political shock without weakening the war effort. Moscow will try to make sure it cannot. You've reached the end of today's intelligence download. If you enjoyed it, a review or comment helps the show find the right people. For more Russia, China, Iran, the Middle East, and DPRK coverage, visit restrictedhandling.substack.com. Until next time.